Paul is my working husband. What the hell is a working husband? Oh, Wendy, you've always been a bit of a prude. It's in vogue these days. Heck, a lot of the girls in my office have work husbands. I repeat, what the hell is a work husband? Sarah sighed. Why is her damn sister stuck in the dark ages? Well, I think it's just fun, a way to relieve stress or boredom at work. The guy in the office is dating one of the girls, and they act like husband and wife at work. Wendy stared at her sister in disbelief. How similar are they to husband and wife? Oh, we look at each other, tell him when he has his fly open, encourage him when he's sad, go to lunch with him and all that. What about the more popular things that husbands and wives do? Sarah thought quickly. Could she not tell her sister anymore? No, she concluded. The rest of the story couldn't be kept a secret, and without full disclosure, it doesn't make any sense. She mentally prepared herself for the coming condemnation. Yes. Just something quick to do while working, Or sometimes pretending to work late and doing it in the office after everyone else has left. But this only happened 4 or 5 times. Mostly it was just in the motel room across the street on a long lunch break. Saying this out loud, Sarah began to realize how pathetic her reasoning sounded. She avoided Wendy's eyes and fell silent. And this time, it wasn't a long lunch or late night work. You called me after midnight. Oh, I see. Dave went on a business trip, didn't he? So, it was a case of lying to the sister to get her to babysit and spend the whole night with the so-called work husband, wasn't it? Sarah's gaze lowered was the only answer Wendy needed. How many times did I have to look after your children while you were setting your husband up? I'm not at all glad that you made me an accomplice, I swear, Wendy, this was the first time. Honestly. If Wendy had any bets, she would back her sister as a truth-teller. Why is this little sister? Was this the first time his wife had left? No, he is not married. Well, then everything is in order. At least he doesn't commit adultery. Glad that the worst seemed to be over, Sarah ignored her sister's sarcasm and answered without thinking. No, he's a completely decent guy. He would never do something like that. Sarah's brain finally caught up with her mouth and she turned beet red. Wendy just looked at her little sister and shook her head, thinking that this wasn't the first time their parents had spoiled their younger offspring. What about your husband? What about Dave? What will you say when he sits opposite you and not me? For a moment, Sarah panicked. I told you, if you get me out of here in the morning, Paul will wake up and tell the police what he did, then Dave will never know anything. Unless, of course, I tell him. Wendy paused before adding, or Mick. Do this, and the possible disintegration of my family will fall on your heads. The children will be left without a father because of you. Sarah definitely looked at Wendy, who looked at her in disbelief. She knew her little sister always had trouble accepting blame for a mistake, but this was funny. Okay, you're wrong, Sarah. But even if Mick and I don't do this, Dave will definitely catch you one day. In the end, traitors are always caught. What was your plan if he found out? I didn't even think about it until one night last week when Dave almost caught Paul and me. What's happened, Ed? I called Dave and told him that he would have to cook dinner for the children since I was late at work. But it wasn't work, was it? Wendy, already knowing the answer, could not hide her disappointment in her little sister. Sarah, however, did not notice anything. No. The office was empty and the front door to the building was locked, but the damn cleaning lady let Dave in, stupid bitch. He brought me dinner. Luckily, Paul finished bending me over the desk, and luckily I thought to lock my office door. When Dave knocked, Paul and I cleaned up in record time, and I opened the door. Lucky Dave is naive enough to swallow our story about accidentally locking the door. Wendy winced and just shook her head. So, after your brilliant evasion, what was your cunning plan in case Dave actually caught you? Well, according to my friend Jen, I don't have to do anything. If Dave kicks me out, I get everything. Child custody, house, alimony. Apparently, unless the mother is in jail, she gets everything. My plan was to just point this out to Dave because then he would never leave me. He lives for the sake of his children. I don't think you'll have to explain this to him, Sarah, especially after his first wife did this to him. They both reflected on the well-known tragic story of Dave's first marriage, ambushed by the wife and her lawyer lover. fabricated physical abuse charges that allowed the ex to get a full restraining order. There was a constant whisper in the children's ears so that they eventually refused to talk to their father, even on the phone. Wendy had tears in her eyes as she sympathized with Dave's desperate situation. She was ashamed to be related to Sarah. How could Sarah even think about doing this to her husband? "You're right, Sarah. It would kill him if he went through this again." That's it. Wendy stared at the disgusting creature her sister had become and wanted to wipe the grin off her face. "You never know for sure, though. Dave is smart. He may come up with a solution that will puzzle you." "No, Wendy. The worst that can happen is that I lose Dave but gain everything else. If Dave throws you out, you can always sleep with Paul." "Not after what that slug did to me. I can't believe they're accusing me of assault. I was just defending myself. This idiot raped me." "What? Did your office husband rape you?" "Well, marital rape is a hot topic at the moment." "Okay, Sarah, tell me the rest. You said he was decent, so how did you get raped by a decent man?" Wendy's sarcasm went over Sarah's head. She was silent for a moment before deciding to tell her sister the whole sordid story, no matter how awkward it might be. "Well, like I said, I've never had a full night with Paul before. Just a few scenes in the motel and a few quick ones in the office. So when Dave said he was going to Ballarat for 3 days, I jumped at the chance to see what Paul was really like." "Don't roll your eyes like that. I understand you don't approve. This is my life, and it was my choice. I dropped the kids off at your house, had dinner with Paul, and then call it Dave like I always do when he's away. How do you do it, Sarah?" "What am I doing?" "You talk to your husband as if nothing is happening." Only Sarah knew the demons she faced in the early stages of her office romance with her lover. However, these painful moments of conscience quickly faded from memory, and the realization emerged that Dave was easy to deceive because he trusted her. She chose to regard her sister's question as rhetorical and ignored it. "After I was able to talk to Dave before he asked permission to talk to the kids, Paul and I got down to business. I have to say it was a bit of a disappointment. The motel felt rushed, different, and fun. When he bent me over the table at work, we just had sex. It was basal and exciting. I must have been making plans in my head all night, and reality couldn't compete with them. It was routine and, dare I say, a little boring. Paul doesn't really like foreplay. At dinner, he drank almost the entire bottle of wine. I dozed off for a bit, then woke up feeling excited. I woke him up and told him that I urgently needed a portion of good sex, but he said that first I needed to take a shower. Before I had time to heat the water to the right temperature, Paul joined me, and suddenly all the lights went out. He told me the house was old, and the fuses kept tripping. He walked out, and I heard him fumbling for the handle of the bedroom door. I figured he'd grab a flashlight from somewhere and replace the wick before getting back into the shower. I waited almost 10 minutes, but he never returned. I shouted to him, and I think I heard him shout from the bedroom that he was waiting for me in bed. I wonder why he didn't fix the wick or light the candle or something. It was still pitch dark. I turned off the water and called, but there was no answer. I couldn't understand why he was acting so annoying. I fumbled around until I found a towel, shouting that I would get dressed and go home. But my clothes were left in the bedroom. Wendy yawned. It was already very late, and Sarah's words and behavior contradicted her statement of rape. Besides, the story was getting boring. Sarah hurried on. I groped my way into the bedroom, thinking that I would feel my way to the bed. I knew that my clothes were lying on the floor between the bed and the door. Suddenly, Paul grabbed me from behind and pushed me forward. I fell on the bed. The bastard simply, at full depth and at full speed, began to penetrate all my exits. I never liked anything there, and I have to say, Wendy, it hurt like hell. Still. Sarah fell silent, shifting uncomfortably in her chair and frowning at the pain in her butt. The memory of pain came flooding back. Not just physical, but the sudden realization that someone she thought truly cared about her could treat her like this. "What have you done?" "Well," I yelled at him sharply. "And what did he do?" "He just held my hips tightly and continued to rape me. Damn, it hurts." "How did it all end?" "That idiot must have loosened his grip at some point, which allowed me to escape, and I shuffled across the bed. When I did this, My hands felt something strange. I'll be back in a bit. When I first walked into Paul's bedroom, there was a baseball bat against the wall next to the bed. I asked him about it, and he said there had been a few home invasions in the neighborhood lately, and he wanted to be prepared. Somehow she ended up on the bed. Now that I think about it, it seems strange. For a moment, Sarah's face took on a strange expression. Do you think Paul wanted to use it on me if he couldn't overpower me by force? Wendy watched Sarah's expression as she realized the true nature of her work husband's intentions and how much worse the situation could have gotten. The color drained from Sarah's face and she fell silent, causing Wendy to invite her to continue. What happened next? Sarah shook herself and came out of her reverie. Well, I grabbed the bat with both hands. I turned around and hit the bat as hard as I could. I felt the blow and heard Paul scream in pain. It was still dark, but I returned to the bathroom as quickly as possible. I closed the door and groped around for the lock until I found it. Oh, Wendy, it was so scary. I heard Paul trying to open the lock and banging on the door. I knew it wouldn't keep him out long, so I felt for the window, but couldn't find how it opened. My foot hit a trash can on the floor, so I grabbed it and broke the window. Then I started screaming and yelling. I saw the light turn on in the neighboring house, so I continued to call for help and call the police. Sarah trembled at the memory of the fear she felt while all this was happening. What did Paul do? I don't know, but he stopped rushing to the bathroom. I waited 5 or 10 minutes, and although everything was quiet, I was too scared to open the door. Then I heard the siren of a police car. The next thing I remember is a policeman yelling at me to open the door. I did so and left. There were 2 of them with a torch and pistols. I was completely naked so they could see I wasn't a threat, and there was no sign of Paul. I was scared, and I ran downstairs. One of the policemen followed me, while the other remained in the bedroom. Shortly after that, I heard him screaming into the radio, calling an ambulance. I told the other guy that I didn't need him. He came back upstairs, grabbed my clothes, and I got dressed. He took me to the police car and started asking me a bunch of questions. I told him how Paul raped me and how I hit him. He took me to the hospital, they gave me a rape kit, and then they brought me here. They took an official statement and then asked if I needed a lawyer. Of course, I said no. They then accused me of assaulting Paul and took my fingerprints. They found Paul unconscious next to the bed. I was then told that they would hold me here until my bail hearing tomorrow. Of course, I couldn't call Dave, so I called you. Sarah looked at her sister pleadingly, hoping that Wendy would help her feel less alone and confused. Wendy thought about finding a police officer and asking why her sister was accused of what on the surface seemed like an obvious case of self-defense. However, Wendy was affected by her sister's pitiful condition. Sarah had always had a talent for making others care about her, and Wendy felt that she should not leave Sarah alone. I really don't understand how you're going to keep Dave in the loop about all this. What's your plan? Well, as soon as Paul comes to his senses, he'll tell them I only hit him in self-defense, and they'll drop the assault charges. Wendy looked at her naive sister with pity. She knew that to exonerate her, Paul would have to confess to rape, and although she didn't know the guy, someone who seduced a married woman was unlikely to be so noble. She was spared the agony of trying to explain this to her desperate sister when a plainclothes detective entered the room and asked her to leave. When she left, the detective sat down in an empty chair and began alternately looking at Sarah and reading her testimony. Sarah tried to read his expression, hoping Paul was telling the truth. Finally, the detective put the document aside and turned to the hopeful woman. So, let me get this straight, Mrs. Brown. You've been having an illicit affair with your work husband behind your husband's back for months. In the evening, when your husband is out of town, you decide to spend the night at your lover's house. During sex, you paused to take a shower, at which time the lights went out. When your lover did not return, you re-entered the bedroom, whereupon you claimed that he attacked you and anally raped you. You found a baseball bat on the bed and hit him once. Is that right? Yes, I've already told you everything. Has Paul regained consciousness? He must admit that everything I said is true. No, I'm afraid he hasn't regained consciousness. In fact, it is my responsibility to tell you that you have gone from office wife to office widow. Mr. Paul Smith died without regaining consciousness after being found on the bedroom floor between his bed and the wall, with massive multiple wounds to his head. Doctors say he was hit up to 7 times, mostly while he was lying on the floor, likely unconscious. The baseball bat found at the crime scene had your fingerprints and the deceased's fingerprints on it. Sarah Brown, you are charged with second-degree murder. Let me remind you that you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you. At this moment, Sarah lost consciousness. Dave Brown said goodnight to the 2 police officers before they left the room and reviewed his answers to their recent questions. Yes, he checked into a motel in Ballarat this afternoon around 5. He had had an early dinner at the motel restaurant, as he was sure his waitress, a red-haired woman in her 30s with glasses, could attest to. Then, unfortunately, he retired to his room to prepare without witnesses to resume the business meeting the next day. The only phone call he made or received was from his wife's mobile at just after 9. Now that he thought about it, it seemed a little strange that she was using her cell phone instead of her home phone. No, he did not know Paul Smith. He never communicated with his wife's work colleagues. Can't they tell him what's wrong? After they left, he called Sarah's home phone and cell phone. He left worried messages for her to call him back. Contemplating his next move, he rubbed his bruised bicep and absent-mindedly shoved his hands into his trouser pockets. Feeling something soft, he pulled out the contents and stared wearily at the 2 latex gloves and the used condom in his palm. He smiled wryly at his mistake. If the police searched him, it could ruin all his carefully laid plans. This thought made him think, and he cursed himself for his lack of thoroughness. His children needed him to be more focused. He pulled back the curtains to make sure the police car had driven away, then left the room, crossed the road, and headed toward the back of the mall. Looking around, he took it out of his pocket again and tossed everything into the dumpster, where it joined the night vision goggles, disposable coveralls, an intact fuse box he had tossed there earlier. Returning to his room, he began to pack his things despite being tired, thinking about all the details he needed to do to become a successful single parent. A smile played on his lips at the thought of the hard work he had done, and done well. Subscribe to our channel so that your second shaft doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.